Thank you for giving us your time. Today, we would like to focus on sharing our vision of how life for Singaporeans could be made better, like the air after one of our heavy thunderstorms, cool and clear and refreshing. We know Singapore is facing tough times ahead of us, but this is the exact time that we can use to pause and shift the direction in which Singapore was heading. You know that things have happened very quickly for us here at Red Dot United, but we believe it is always important to take a step back and think through what is important to us as a nation and what should guide us into the future. That is why we come to you as a solid team, working together and heading in the same direction. We will put the people of Singapore first, at the front and centre of our policies. We believe that in order to look at how things can get better, we need to first look at what could be improved. I have listened to the speeches made by our ministers and by our Prime Minister. What I heard was that PAP has done very well and they will continue to do more of the same, since there is no problem and they feel they are doing the right things. Now, what I would like to talk about may not seem directly related to COVID-19 situation or the immediate issues that we are facing, but they are fundamental issues, and we as a people really need to examine them and understand that they are problematic. Let us begin to fix the very roots of our problems so that we can mature as a country and progress boldly into the future together. The first point I would like to make is that outside of the government, we are not given very much information at all. Even when international organizations calculate rankings and statistics, I have been told that Singapore is often reluctant to provide raw data. The government will ask how a measure is calculated and then provide those statistics instead. There's too much we do not know, too much that the government tells us we do not need to know. Even when ex-President Ong Teng Cheong asked once how much was in the reserves, he did not receive a proper answer. Curious indeed, considering that part of the President's job is to safeguard the reserves. When the government feels they have a right not to give us information, we are kept in the dark. The people, the press, academics, economists, we are all unable to tell what is really going on. The systems become obscured. There is a lack of fairness and accountability. And without transparency, much is shrouded in darkness. The government can POFMA comments without releasing what is the actual fact to support their claim. This asymmetry of information not only works against a robust system of good governance, it can also be used against what is in the best interests of the people. Red Dot United believes that being open helps keep us honest. And as citizens, we must have the right to information. A member of Parliament who asks a question needs to be given an answer in Parliament, not told in reply, "What is the point of your question?" That is why Red Dot United advocates strongly for government accountability. Transparency is essential, and we will not falter in our call for a Freedom of Information Act, because this is in Singapore's best interests. I quote from the Human Rights NGO Article 19, which describes information as the oxygen of democracy, and the UN Human Development Report, which describes informed debate as the lifeblood of democracies. How can it be that even though our Prime Minister's own wife heads one of our two sovereign wealth funds, we don't know what her remuneration is, and economists themselves, who have scrutinized their annual reports, say the figures for Temasek Holdings are a mystery to them. Temasek manages over 300 billion of Singapore's money, is a state-owned enterprise, and holds large shares of many of Singapore's large companies, including DBS, Capital Land, Sabana, ST Engineering, PSA, SMRT, SIA, and many others. Several of its investments over years have been described by international press as spectacular misjudgments. Madam Ho Ching has been the CEO of Temasek for 16 years now, the same amount of time as her husband has been our Prime Minister. Put these facts to any child, and they may be as uneasy as you or I. In Economics 101, we learn that information is power. That is why governments need to be regulators to prevent abuses of such power. Failing that, it is the people who must question their leaders. This brings me to my second point, which is about conflicts of interest. Our government, as mentioned earlier, holds significant stakes in many of our large businesses that dominate our domestic economy. Not only does this place the government in conflict and competition with our local small and medium enterprises, it becomes natural for the government to view us as customers and digits, rather than as individuals and valued citizens to whom they owe a duty of care. Can you serve both money and people? There would be numerous scenarios where the interests of profits and care for the people would conflict. Take our army of foreign workers. We have hundreds of thousands of them, a fact that we are acutely aware of given the 3-digit new COVID-19 cases of foreign workers diagnosed daily over the past few months. Each of these workers represents hundreds of dollars paid to the government in levies every single month. Cutting down on the numbers then means reducing a significant income stream to the government coffers. The wages paid to our Singaporean workers, employers see this as a cost, and it is in their interests to keep wages low. And the government and GLCs are some of the biggest employers in Singapore. A government which cares about the good of its people and workers would prioritize the interests of workers. But how can it do so when this would be in conflict with the government's own interests? Let's look at healthcare. Each of us knows how unexpectedly illnesses may come upon us, and many have told us of their treatment bills. I have heard several times that patients are told that they could go home, but if they stayed one night in hospital, the insurance would pay their bill. The items on the final bill are also sometimes inaccurate. If insurance pays for this, the patient is not as mindful. However, this feeds back into high premiums deducted from our CPF accounts. And this means for all Singaporeans. Who benefits? Is it SingHealth and other holding companies? Who pays the ultimate costs? Clearly, our people do. There's actually a term for this. It is called moral hazard. If a person can reap the rewards of his actions, but have someone else bear the risks, that is moral hazard. It is why we have proposed policies which are very different from what we have now. By putting people back at the center of our nation's policies, we remind the PAP that the happiness and standard of living of the people is their main job, their priority, not the numbers in the annual reports of the GLCs and government budgets. We appreciate the large sums the government COVID-19 budgets are giving to help the people. However, we do caution that the money that has been set aside, does it really help the right people who need it? Or is there a lot of fine print and requirements that must first be met in order to qualify for aid, as the Medifund system works, as several government handouts and helping schemes work. When the government gives handouts, it is on a suka-suka basis. When the government refuses any applications or requests, they also reserve the right not to explain the reason behind it. This means that we have no assurances as to the help that we receive. No security or peace of mind is being offered here. There is a big difference between having legislation that provides for supplemental income for those below the poverty line or for our elderly poor, legislation that protects our workers, legislation that protects our jobs, and legislation that puts in place national health insurance, and the occasional rebates, vouchers, and offsets. The difference is that one is given at a timing suitable for the PAP, and the other will be there all the time. It becomes a duty and a responsibility of the government rather than a handout where they position themselves as the generous donor. This brings me to my last point, which is about the strong versus the weak. As the strong big brother or fatherly figure, strength, money, power, numbers are all on the side of the incumbent PAP. Yet, when we look at how resistant the PAP is to reform, to taking the high road, to implementing a free and fair system and electoral process, we have to question, what have they done with a strong mandate all these years? Daily life in Singapore has been politicized to the extent that community work or upgrading of our HDB flats or help with traffic police summons or even use of the basketball courts necessitate approaching the ruling party's people for help. The need for control is so high that choices are removed from us. Decisions are forced from us. They were unable to allow us free choice in the last presidential election, and we see a strong hand used even against the Prime Minister's own family members, his younger sister and brother, his sister-in-law, his nephew. The message is clear. Power lies firmly in the hands of the PAP, and they will not hesitate to wield it. There is only one solution to this imbalance, just as there is one solution to a schoolyard bully, and that is people. People are the answer. If enough people come forward to send a clear signal that our freedoms and choices are important to us, that our livelihoods and jobs are necessary to our survival and dignity, and that our families and children should grow up in a Singapore they love and want to have their own children in, if enough people point our country in the right direction, we can have a better Singapore. Our suggestions for a post-COVID-19 plan are clearly laid out in our Charter for the Future. Please visit red.united.sg. We have also categorized them into 3 main goals that all our efforts will be directed at. First, improving the lives of Singaporeans and reducing their anxiety through lowering business costs for SMEs, supporting good long-term jobs for Singaporeans, strengthening unions, lowering healthcare costs, improving income supplements for those below the poverty line. 2, creating more options and choices for Singaporeans, being able to assess your savings in your CPF, more broad-based education with less focus on examinations, greater flexibility for HDB purchases and renewals. 3, getting Singapore truly ready for the future. More support for SMEs instead of the larger GLCs, smaller class sizes for neighbourhood schools, critical thinking and creativity built into our curriculum, and jobs matching skills training for our people, and focus on climate change policies. Our plans are not old and tired, as our Prime Minister suggested in his rally speech. On the contrary, they are pointing in a direction we have not gone in before. We have explained why it is difficult for the PAP or anyone from the PAP to do so. They have too much to lose. Unless the people show them that they need to muster the political will in putting the people of Singapore front and centre. Let us bear in mind my daughter's favourite quote from Harry Potter, where Dumbledore says to Minister Fudge, "You are blinded by the love of the office that you hold, Cornelius." Now let's talk about the Tharman factor. We've said it a few times. He's the most popular PAP minister. We like him too. Many residents want to support us and vote for us, but they are worried about a government without a Tharman. So once again, Red Dot United thought long and hard, and we have come up with a solution to this dilemma. We are well aware of a petition going around calling for Senior Minister Tharman to be made the next Prime Minister. Sorry, we didn't sign it. It's because no matter how many people and how many signatures you get on there, it won't matter. A survey by Yahoo showed that 7 in 10 Singaporeans supported, not just accepted, Tharman for the next Prime Minister. But it doesn't matter how many of the people ask for this. This decision is not in your hands or mine. The PAP gave a certain reason. Many find this reason distasteful. But really, just like the initial call not to wear masks, we will never know if this is the real reason. It could be he's a victim of his own success after gaining the highest score in Jurong GRC last general election. Now you and I know the choice of Prime Minister is left up to the PAP CEC. Our petition or votes will not matter. They will not choose him as the next Prime Minister. They have made it clear. However, there is one way, and one way only, in which your vote will matter. That is in the presidential election to come in 2023. Your vote determines our national head of state. Just as Jurong GRC contributed Madam Halima, where she was first elected as an MP in 2001, Jurong GRC can once again support another of its MPs into the highest office in the land. This is a win-win situation, with Red Dot United as your members in Parliament and Tharman for President. So residents of Jurong GRC, come Friday, 10th of July, please vote without hesitation for Red Dot United.